Pirates lived a life of freedom as they braved the seas, attacking and plundering merchant ships. But disease, war, and other hardships threatened their lives, and many pirates lost their lives in pursuit of their dangerous chosen profession. Although pirates' successes were sometimes short-lived, the lure of a life of freedom still attracts many people. Let's take a closer look at the stories of some of history's most famous pirates. Edward Teach, Blackbeard. Edward Teach was born in Bristol, England in the late 17th century and began his career as a sailor on merchant ships before turning to piracy. He quickly honed his seafaring skills and embarked on a life of piracy. When he started piracy, he changed his name to Blackbeard. His career as a pirate began under the captaincy of Benjamin Hornigold, who operated out of Jamaica, plundering ships from all nations unlucky enough to venture into his crosshairs. Under the tutelage of Hornigold, Blackbeard became infamous in his own right as captain of a ship he had captured and renamed Queen Anne's Revenge. While Hornigold accepted an offer of amnesty from the British government, Blackbeard did not. He stayed in the Caribbean to seek his fortune as a pirate. Blackbeard became the most notorious and feared pirate of the Caribbean. According to the legends, he was a giant man with a dark, dusky beard covering half his face, wearing a great red coat to make him look even bigger. He carried 2 swords at his waist and had bandoliers full of pistols and knives across his chest. During battle, he was known to fire slow-burning fuses in his beard, creating a smoke-filled and horrifying spectacle that made his opponents believe he was a demon. He commanded 4 ships and had a pirate army of 300 at the height of his career, and defeated the famous warship HMS Scarborough in a sea battle. In the Caribbean, he captured more than 40 merchant ships and killed many prisoners without hesitation. The blockade of Charleston, South Carolina in 1718 was Blackbeard's most heinous act. He kidnapped many ships and held them for ransom, lifting the blockade only after the local authorities satisfied his demands. Blackbeard targeted great treasures at sea. British, French, and Spanish ships were his constant targets. He had a loyal crew among the pirates, and under his leadership, the ship was a respected force on all seas. His ship was captured by the Royal Navy under Lieutenant Robert Maynard. The ensuing fight was fierce, and when Blackbeard finally fell, he had 20 sword wounds and 5 musket ball wounds. It is believed that the British sailor Blackbeard beheaded Lieutenant Maynard as he was about to kill him. Benjamin Hornigold. Perhaps best known for mentoring Edward Teach, Captain Benjamin Hornigold was a notorious pirate captain who operated in the Bahamas during the early 18th century. As one of the most influential pirates on New Providence Island, he had control over Fort Nassau, protecting the bay and the entrance to the harbor. When he was 33 years old, Hornigold began his pirate career in 1713 by attacking merchant ships in the Bahamas. By the year 1717, Hornigold was the captain of the Ranger, one of the most heavily armed ships in the region. It was at that time when he appointed Edward Teach as his second-in-command. Hornigold was described by others as a kind and skilled captain who treated prisoners better than other pirates. As an ex-privateer, Hornigold would eventually take the decision to turn his back on his former companions. In December 1718, he accepted a king's pardon for his crimes and became a pirate hunter, pursuing his former allies on behalf of the governor of the Bahamas, Woodes Rogers. Captain William Kidd. William Kidd, or Captain Kidd, as he is often remembered, was one of the most renowned privateers and pirates of the late 17th century. Like so many pirates before and after him, Kidd had originally begun his career as a privateer, commissioned by the British during the 9 Years' War to defend its trade routes between America and the West Indies. He was later employed on a pirate hunting expedition in the Indian Ocean. As was the case with many other pirate hunters, however, the temptations of plunder and booty were too great to ignore. One of his biggest achievements was capturing the Quedagh Merchant, an Indian ship laden with cargo worth 70,000 pounds, making it one of the biggest hauls in pirating history. It also marked Kidd as a high priority for pirate hunters, as the English government had taken a tough line on piracy. Unfortunately for Kidd, it was now 2 years since he had begun his original voyage, and whilst his attitudes toward piracy had evidently softened, attitudes in England had become a lot stricter. Piracy was to be stamped out and was now declared a criminal act. What ensued was one of the most notorious pirate hunts in all of history. Kidd finally arrived in the West Indies in April 1699, only to find that the American colonies were gripped by pirate fever. Up and down the coast, everyone was on the hunt for pirates, and his name was at the top of the list. The hunt for Captain Kidd was the first to be live documented in newspapers around the Atlantic world. The Scottish pirate managed to negotiate a pardon from the English authorities for his actions, yet he knew his time was up. When he arrived in the West Indies in 1699, he discovered that the agents of the English were searching for him everywhere he went. He sailed to Boston, where he was given up to the authorities by the governor of New England, who had promised Kidd clemency. After the betrayal, Kidd was sent back to England to stand trial. Captain Kidd's treatment was extremely harsh, as the authorities sought to make an example of him. During his trial, he was found guilty of not only piracy, but also an incident in 1697 where he accidentally killed one of his mutinous crew members by hitting him on the head with a bucket. Surprisingly, it was this incident for which he was sentenced to death. Captain William Kidd was hanged on 23 May 1701. The first rope put around this neck broke, so he had to be strung up a second time. His corpse was placed in a gibbet at the mouth of the Thames River and left to rot, as an example to other would-be pirates. Bartholomew Roberts, better known as Black Bart Roberts, this famous pirate was a Welshman born in 1682 in Pembrokeshire. By sheer number of ships captured, he was the most successful pirate during the Golden Age of Piracy. With a small fleet, usually between 2 and 4 ships, Black Bart Roberts captured over 400 vessels, arguably more than all his famous contemporaries combined. Roberts started his career in the merchant navy, where he earned very little and had no chance of promotion. He was the second mate aboard a slave ship when it was captured, and Roberts was pressed into piracy by his captors. His captain was shot dead on the way to meet the governor of Principe in the Caribbean, and his crew elected Roberts to replace him. His first act was to exact revenge. After killing a large portion of the inhabitants of Principe, Roberts won the admiration of his crew and soon captured his own vessel in 1721, which he renamed Royal Fortune. This ship was close to being impregnable, so well armed and protected that only a formidable Navy vessel could hope to stand against her. Roberts was so successful in part because he usually commanded a fleet of anywhere from 2 to 4 pirate ships which could surround and catch victims. In large numbers, this pirate convoy could set its limits high. Black Bart was also ruthless, and so his crew and enemies feared him. Black Bart Roberts' career spanned much of the Atlantic. He raided ships off the coast of Brazil all the way north to Newfoundland and all the way east to the coast of Africa. This put his activities on the same route as the slave trade, and his targets were often slave ships. He would capture slave ships and demand gold from their captains for their return. When one captain refused, Roberts burnt the vessel, killing all its crew and cargo. He was absolutely merciless. His reign of terror finally ended, however, off the West African coast in February 1722, when he was killed in a sea battle with a British warship. His passing and the mass trial and hanging of his crew that followed marked the real end of the Golden Age. Charles Vane. Charles Vane was born in England around 1680. He began his piracy career during the War of the Spanish Succession. In 1715, he obtained a large booty from the wreck of the Spanish treasure fleet. He gained a reputation as an independent pirate out of Nassau. When King George II's offer of amnesty affected the pirates, Vane did not accept the pardon and led. However, he was captured by the British Navy and released. He returned to piracy, capturing ships around Jamaica. Vane's problems increased when Governor Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau. He was cornered in the harbor, but escaped with a maneuver. However, his luck quickly ran out. After losing with his crew against the ship he had attacked, he was forced to abandon ship. Recognized by a British Navy officer, he was captured and tried on piracy charges. He was hanged in November 1720. Anne Bonny. Born Anne Bonny in County Cork in 1697, at a time when women had few rights of their own, Bonny had to show tremendous courage to become an equal crew member and a respected pirate. The illegitimate daughter of her father and a servant, Bonny was taken as a young child to the New World after her father's infidelity was made public in Ireland. There, she fell in love with a privateer named James Bonny and was raised on a plantation until she was 16. After marrying James, much to the disapproval of her father, Bonny established herself in the pirate hideout of New Providence. The extensive network she built with numerous pirates shortly began to compromise her marriage, as James Bonny had become a pirate informer. Her feelings towards the notorious pirate Jack Rackham didn't help matters either, and the two ran off together in 1719. Aboard Rackham's vessel Revenge, Bonny developed an intimate personal relationship with Mary Reed, another female pirate who disguised herself as a man. Legend has it that Bonny fell in love with Reed only to be bitterly disappointed when she revealed her true gender. Rackham was also thought to have become extremely jealous of the two's intimacy. After becoming pregnant with Rackham's child and delivering it in Cuba, Bonny returned to her lover. In October 1720, Revenge was attacked by a Royal Navy ship whilst most of Rackham's crew were drunk. Bonny and Reed were the only crew to resist. The crew of Revenge were taken to Port Royal to stand trial. At the trial, the true genders of the female prisoners were revealed. Anne and Mary did manage to avoid execution, however, by pretending to be pregnant. Reed was to die of fever in prison, whilst the fate of Bonny remains unknown to this date. We only know that she was never executed. Henry Every. Henry Every was a famous English pirate who sailed the Atlantic and Indian Oceans in the 1690s. Every was the first mate aboard the English warship Charles II when the crew grew discontented over unpaid wages and mutinied, electing Henry Every as their new captain. On September 7, 1695, Henry Every led a combined force of pirates in one of the most famous pirate raids in history. He attacked a 25-ship convoy from India, making a pilgrimage to Mecca. The loot from the raid was estimated at $600,000, which is about $97,110 million in 2022. The raid caused significant problems with British and Indian relations, and the first worldwide manhunt in history began. Many of his crew were captured, but Every himself evaded capture, and the rest of his life is a complete mystery. Over the course of just 2 years, his career in piracy made him one of the most famous pirates in history. Franois Lon. Jean-David Neu, also known as Franois Lon, was a notorious and exceptionally cruel buccaneer in the Caribbean during the 17th century. Born around 1635 in France, he was infamous for his extreme brutality towards the Spanish. His actions were horrific and unmatched in the history of piracy. Lolonaise initially served as a buccaneer in Saint-Domingue, showing exceptional talent for robbing and killing Spaniards. He conducted merciless attacks, even organizing brutal land assaults. Notoriously surviving a shipwreck in the Yucatan Peninsula in 1663, he escaped the slaughter of his crew by pretending to be dead and cunningly evading the Spanish. Seeking revenge, he partnered with Michel de Basco, leading a force of over 600 buccaneers targeting cities like Maracaibo and Gibraltar. In their assaults, he engaged in abominable acts of torture, forcing citizens to reveal hidden treasures. Despite these extreme measures, the rewards often fell short of their expectations, leading to city ransoms and immense frustration among his followers. His sadistic, bloodthirsty streak dominated his career, as he is said to have eaten the heart of a Spanish soldier during one of his many attacks. Subsequent raids faced challenges, encountering poor towns with minimal treasures. Disillusioned buccaneers left, leaving Lolonais with a small crew. Attempting to conquer Nicaragua, their remaining ship was wrecked, and ultimately, Lolonais was captured and gruesomely killed by the Spanish-aligned Indians. The death of the pirates, the ensuing mass trial, and the hanging of the crew marked the true end of the Golden Age,